back to Third Phase of Moon. My name's Blake Cousins. Have you ever asked yourself why aliens are abducting humans and what happens to them when they're aboard the UFO? In this groundbreaking documentary, we'll ask three abductees of what happened to them, their astonishing experiences, and what is to come of the alien-human population. Rachel, Dave, and Jacqueline have shared amazing experiences together in regards to the alien abduction phenomenon. UFO investigator for MUFON for over 27 years and author of 17 books in regards to UFOs, Preston Dennett will ask Rachel, Jacqueline, and Dave about their amazing experience, along with our special correspondent, young Jack Graham, being there on the scene asking the big questions. Also, our special correspondent in Los Angeles, Dr. Andy Ilias, will chime in and give his opinion of what is happening around the world in regards to alien abduction. We at Third Phase of Moon have decided to release this full-length documentary for free right here on YouTube. The abductees' stories are amazing, and if the phenomenon is true, what does this have to say about humanity? Now, the Alien Abduction Diaries.
Now, can you briefly describe what the scene was like when you got abducted?
It was dark. I was in my room at the time. I had blinds, and I could see like a red amber glow, like if somebody was backing up their car, their brake lights, coming towards the blinds. That's probably the best I could see. The last thing I remember.
And that's the last thing you remember? Do you think you just passed out?
Yes, I was blacked out, passed out. Before that even happened, there was a feeling of fear, like I knew something was coming before that even sort of happened. Like I knew something was coming for me. And I had like this sort of like a swishing, swirling sound. And it just kind of got louder. I wasn't sure if it was coming from the outside or it was something that was coming in from the inside.
Wow.
But as it got closer, I realized it was something that was coming in the inside. And I was just paralyzed with fear to the point where I noticed now I couldn't move. Couldn't move my hands, couldn't move my legs.
Do you remember anything from the actual ship? Do you remember anything about the probes or what happened to you?
I haven't actually seen the ship, and I wasn't even sure if I was in the ship, but I knew I was in a room. When I recovered my consciousness, I was in a room, but things were sort of dark. And wherever I am in the room, it just kind of sort of illuminated, but it was still dark. It had kind of like a neon sort of glow in the room, so to speak.
Can you tell me a bit about your first encounter with aliens?
They go back to childhood.
Really? How young were you when that happened?
I know at least going back to 5, at least, probably my whole life, even before I was born.
Do you think you can tell me a specific example when you were 5 years old about the abductions?
I did. I had a hypnosis regression on it, and I was 5 years old. I was staying at my grandmother's house, and a UFO came down. And I wasn't actually forced. They actually had the type of ETs that I see are humanoid Nordic type, blonde hair, blue eyes, very tall. They actually had a young girl come out and kind of greet me and take me into the ship. So she was about, I think she was about my age, or she was seemingly my age. She was my height. She was blonde hair, blue eyes, and had pigtails. And so I trusted her, and she just kind of guided me on there.
Good question. Yeah. Rachel, when did this start with you?
Well, I can remember as far back as being 4, and that's when things were interesting. I mean, it still happens to this day, but the furthest back was when I was 4, and I'd see beings in my room, but they would come from my closet, and it was really strange. I was really scared, like, when it happened. And
can you describe the beings that you saw in your room?
They were, I guess you can classify them as grays. They're really little, but it seemed like they wanted me to do something, but I was so scared. I don't. Sorry, I'm like nervous talking about it.
As we heard from the other abductee, Dave, his case goes back over 30 years. Apparently, if true, these ETs seem to be taking people at a young age and following them throughout their lives. For what reason? Could it be that they really are infiltrating our planet? Could it be they are making these hybrids? Well, let's hear what our expert has to say.
Can you talk a little bit about the theories of Dr. Jacobs?
I mean, Dr. Jacobs believes that the ETs are basically going to use their hybridization program to have the hybrid babies, as they grow up, eventually come and live among us. I think to a certain extent there's some validity to that theory because a lot of the abductees are reporting seeing hybrid babies. We are seeing these hybrids looking very much like us. I've talked to a number of people who have seen ETs that look very much like us and could pass as human. So I think there is some validity to that theory. I personally don't think that ETs are going to take over our planet. They could have done so long ago if they wanted to. But it's hard to say. I think that we are up for big changes.
Can you talk a bit about the alien probes that have been put into abductees?
Yeah, alien implants. I think pretty much every abductee probably has at least one or more of these implants, and we're not sure what they're for, but the most common theory is they're used for tracking or possibly mind control. But I have talked to several abductees who've been told by the ETs that the purpose for these implants is manifold. There are multiple purposes, including not only tracking, but boosting their immune system and measuring the level of pollution in their body. So there are good reasons for these implants. And I do know people who have had these removed sometimes regret it because the ETs come back and put another one back in.
Wow.
So yeah, that happens in case after case.
Do you feel any emotional attachment to these aliens?
Yes.
Are they positive or negative? How do you feel about them?
Like, I trust them, but I don't trust them. So it's kind of mixed feelings.
Where did this happen? Were you in your house when you saw it?
I was, it was at night, everyone was sleeping. I noticed there were lights outside, so I went down the hallway to the backyard. And I actually wasn't allowed to go into the backyard, but I went in the backyard and then I saw there was kind of like magical stuff going on there. I would say they were using screenshots or something, making me feel safe. I knew that there was a lot of lights. I didn't actually know there was a UFO until the little girl that greeted me led me up into what I knew later was a ship.
How did you know they were aliens?
They look like grays, and I guess it's very common. They were little, big eyes, very cold though. They weren't very nice.
Can you describe what the typical abduction scenario is like?
Well, it feels like a dream state, you know. You just wake up and there you are, or something's in front of you. Most of the time, I'll just black out and I won't remember anything. And then I'll wake up and there's something in the room with me.
Do you believe you have any alien implants?
Not anymore.
Did you get them removed?
Not here.
So do you think the aliens removed them?
Yes.
Why do you think they did this? What do you think their agenda is?
To evolve, like the planet's gonna change or the environment's gonna change. So what they're looking for is some type of biological information so that when the environment change and they need to repopulate, they have the information or DNA makeup to create these new vessels.
Of all the famous abduction cases that have happened, do you find any cases that you closely relate to or that were similar to your experience?
Yes, different abductions.
Like people you've talked to, did you find similarities to your stories?
Yes, I do.
What are some of those similarities?
On the table or sperm extraction.
Mm-hmm. Possibly to mate or to examine. Like, do you think they took your sperm so they could create more humans?
Yes, to make more babies. What I was shown is to make some type of babies. I wasn't sure if they were human babies. I actually got a chance to see the bodies that they were like in this sort of incubator of some kind. They're kind of like embedded in a wall. They're like in rows. And that was my feeling. That.
And do you think these baby humans that were in the wall, were they created possibly from your DNA?
Yes, I feel they were created from my DNA, yes.
Do you think you can go into a bit more detail about, how they looked, especially the Nordic type?
They look, I would say, about 8 feet tall, very lanky, thin, white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes. They look human, actually, just a little bit taller and very telepathic. They don't ever move their mouth or anything. I know what they, so they're just telepathic with me. And I have several experiences with them, so I think that's their true form.
It's anxiety, fear, every negative feeling you can feel at that moment in time.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not positive for you at all?
No. I mean, I've had positive experiences, but I've also had negative experiences. So.
Have you had any encounters with other species of aliens?
Yes, I've seen many different types of species. The ones on the ship have always been the Nordic-looking type, but I have seen what are considered the White Yeti. I have seen what are considered the Draco Reptilian, not the standard reptilian, but the very tall, muscular, with very long wings reptilians. I have seen ancient deities from Egypt, which are considered to be possibly ET or some sort of spiritual manifestation. I'm not sure. I've seen what are considered Syrian warriors of light type beings that sometimes take over human bodies. That's what research shows. And I've seen what are also considered blue Arcturians. That's what Cynthia Crawford calls them. And they are more of the blue type ET beings, so I've seen those as well.
Were you able to bring anything back from the ship as evidence?
At the time, not anything like I can hold or anything, but like a scar. It was like I had these bumps, and it's like a pus almost.
Possibly from the implant removal, do you think?
It was more like they were trying to fix me. That I had some kind of sickness, and one of the things that they were doing was they had to sort of allow me to die to cure whatever it is, and then put me back. But death is actually a way of treating a cancer or some kind of tumor. So that's how I understood it.
I know Dave mentioned a sexual encounter with the ETs. What's your expert opinion on this?
Well, that does turn up. You know, in many cases, ETs, they're interested in, hybridizing with us. And in some cases, they'll use mechanical means to get our genetic material. In other cases, they use a more intimate means. They'll often disguise themselves so that they don't look like the Greys they really are, but will look like, like Dave said, a doll or a teddy bear. Or in many cases, I've talked to people, I've seen very attractive people who suddenly, transform and they're actually making love to a Grey. So yeah, that does happen. I don't think it's super common, but I've certainly talked to a number of people who have had sexual encounters with ETs, yes.
Do you know why you're being targeted at all?
It may go back to my Native American heritage. I mean, natives were very close to the earth and to the sky. They knew beings were coming down, and they were there, and maybe from that bloodline, it just keeps happening. I don't know. I mean, there's so many possibilities.
I've heard a lot of stories about how people, their families, have been targeted too.
Right.
Do you know, have your family been targeted by aliens?
Not that they're openly talking about. My father was very knowledgeable on Illuminati and that sorts, but I was a little kid and didn't know what he was talking about, so I had no idea. But as an ET, we never really talked about. We believe that, UFOs are real because we've seen them and everything, but we never talked about abduction experiences with each other.
Did you ever talk to your father about it when you were 4 years old?
No, I didn't tell my parents anything. The one thing I did tell them is that there's things in my room, and they told me it's my imagination.
Wow.
Very cold, throw it underneath the table and not talk about it type thing.
Was it still hostile when you were 4 years old? Like, did the experiences evolve throughout your life?
It wasn't as hostile when I was younger. It's just when you're a child and you see something like that, you become very fearful because you don't know. And they put you through a series of tests, like puzzles and everything. As I gotten older, it got scarier because you're getting treated medically or things are going on.
So can you tell me a bit more about the puzzles that Rachel went through with the aliens?
Yeah, the experiences that she had on board these UFOs are actually pretty typical I've heard of what she was saying in regards of putting puzzles together. I've heard that several times from other abductees. I think they want to learn about our minds. And as far as experiencing examination, that's the single most common procedure that people experience when they're taken on board.
So, did the aliens ever try to tell you that you're okay? Did they communicate with you?
Oh yeah, they told me everything was going to be fine, and the pain, it's going to be there, but it'll slowly go away. But when you're in pain, you still feel like something else is going to happen. But I mean, everything's been fine though. So.
Were there any effects afterwards, like any bruises or anything like that?
I have marks on my body. I was actually denying it most of the time because I didn't want to believe what it was. But I mean, it's there, and I live with it. So that's.
Do you believe you ever had an implant?
I don't know. That's one thing I do not know. I have no idea. I have no indication of it. So.
As you heard from this other abductee, Rachel, she's been abducted again at a very young age. If true, that's another person who has this crazy experience. She recalls these beings coming into her room from within her room, from the closet in particular. I mean, if you think about it, that's quite bizarre, but is it? Apparently, as if all these cases are true and all the experts' testimony is true, then it isn't that crazy.
So the first time you were abducted by aliens, can you go over, were you in your house? Were you sleeping?
Yeah, I was in my house. Actually, I had a regression done because a lot of the memory was suppressed. Like, I remember things happening, but I don't remember to my full extent. And the regression pulled out so many aspects of the abduction, but it ended up being a block because it wouldn't let me go further to where I wanted to be. But I was in my room, and I shared a room with my sister. The closet started glowing, and I was like, I don't know what that is, what was going on, and beings came out, and I'm like really scared because I didn't know what was going on. I felt very paralyzed.
Yeah.
But they told me it was okay to come with them, and I was resisting at first. I'm like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to open my eyes. I'm scared. Like, I ended up opening my eyes and seeing them, and it was interesting. So we go back, and end up in a room, and they want us, because my sister, like, I'm not going to talk about that, but they ended up having like a puzzle for us to figure out, something to figure out, and I couldn't get it. I was getting really frustrated about it, and then that's where the block was, and I can't remember after that.
Now, where did this abduction happen?
At that time, I was living in Carson, Long Beach, between Carson and Long Beach, and I lived at this house that was just right by a railroad tracks. Railroad tracks ran behind our house. And at that time I was sharing a room with my grandma, and we would sleep on these mattresses, that's just on the floor. Technically we just sleep on the floor basically. And that night we would have you would close the blinds every night, but before the abduction happened, I would notice there's these red glowing light, amber light, what I suspect is a craft or something that's coming from the sky. And as it was approaching, I had this swirling, swishing sound that was inside me. I couldn't tell it was actually outside. I don't know if it's getting louder. I don't know if it's resonating from inside of me. But as it was going close, I was completely overwhelmed with fear, to the point where now I started to notice I couldn't move my legs, I couldn't move my head. The only thing I could move was pretty much like my eyes.
Yeah, it turns out this is where I live, and I've investigated a number of cases that have taken place here in the San Fernando Valley. And in fact, the whole valley here is a hotbed of UFO activity. I've investigated a case over there in Chatsworth involving an abduction with 2 ladies. There's another case in Reseda involving an entire family. So there are a lot of cases. I investigated another case where people chased a UFO right down Reseda Boulevard. So I don't know what it is about this area, but definitely it's a huge hotbed of activity.
Are there any times that you were lucid while you were abducted?
Sometimes I am awake.
And can you describe that briefly for me?
It just feels like you're in a dream state, but you're awake. And so you kind of have a hard time. It's like that film Inception, where the woman doesn't know whether she's awake or dreaming anymore.
That's scary.
And you start to find that you're having trouble with that distinction.
And do you ever see the aliens at all?
Yes.
And do you know what they look like?
Yes, they're Nordic types, which are the tall, slender, lanky. Some of them are lanky, but they're just slender, blue eyes, blonde hair. So they look human.
Now, was this a singular event, or have there been multiple incidents?
There's been multiple incidents.
How spread out were they?
About like 2 years, maybe a year.
And do you think it was always the same aliens coming back?
Yes. It was always the same one.
And were the incidents similar? Was it the same things happening every time, or were they different?
They would differ. They would be different each time. Sometimes they would appear as something I would recognize in a cartoon or something that I saw at, like a Disneyland character. Like they would come in. Sometimes they would come in like a Barbie doll, Cinderella type. But they had this I had this empathy or this understanding that they had to show that way because I was scared.
They're here to help you.
Yeah, to calm me down.
Do you have any more details about the room you're abducted in?
Actually, all I know is with the symbols and how bright white it was.
What was the room in your house, or do you feel like you were taken somewhere else? Have you seen the symbols that you saw?
The symbols were very similar, I would say. I mean, you've seen hieroglyphs, right? Like
Yeah,
Egyptian or Sumerian. I mean, I cannot say for sure that it was that, but I could say it's somewhat similar almost,
Which is interesting because a lot of people say that aliens might have affected ancient Egyptians building the pyramids.
Right.
So a lot of the symbols could probably be related.
It could be.
Now, have there been any unwanted sexual encounters with abductees?
Yeah, this is a very touchy subject, and I think that some people do feel violated, and rightly so. Absolutely, people feel like they have been, raped by ETs, and that's a horrible thing to say, because I personally think that the ETs are not going to fly here, how many 100 light years they are to come over and terrorize us. That's not what their agenda is. We don't have anything like satanic or, what would I call sadistic behavior on the part of the ETs. So yes, these things do happen, and I know that some people have horrible experiences, but some people feel that their encounters are not negative. So you get the whole range, and it's kind of a lot how much fear you have involved with it, or how you interpret this. So it's hard to say.
As we heard from our expert, Preston Dennett, this is a big phenomena affecting the entire globe, not just here in America. Up to 1 in 50 people claim alien abduction, and several of them have these implants removed. And these implants have been tested and have technology that we can't even figure out. And they're witnesses, as we heard. There are ships that they see. There are ships that are being recorded, as everyone sees. What do these aliens want? As our expert also said, they're trying to infiltrate our planet, which is what Dr. Jacobs' explanation is. Are they really walking here on Earth among us? Could it be that they're alien bases here on Earth? What could this all mean?
Can you go into more detail about the physical bumps that were on your body after the abduction?
Yes, it had some sores. It's kind of white. They were about the size of like, half a dime, so to speak.
Where were they on your body?
They were on my spleen area, where my spleen was.
So how did you guys meet?
We actually met at an event that has to do with ETs, extraterrestrials, aliens, and so we're naturally drawn to this information because we're having experiences. And at the time, both of us didn't know we were having experiences, so the further we looked into it, that's when we realized.
And I know you mentioned the bloodline that's most commonly visited by ETs.
We have the same one. Yeah, we do. We have the same exact blood.
That's a weird coincidence.
Yeah, especially since less than 6% of the population has it.
Now, isn't it possible that they are just impregnated by humans instead?
In some cases, yes, but in other cases, absolutely not, because these people have not had sex. They know it, and so there's no way they could be pregnant. It's impossible. So, and yet they are. So how do you explain that, other than the fact, that it has something to do with that UFO encounter they had where they remember being taken on board and remember, this ET laying on top of them or extracting sperm or injecting something into their abdomen and this type of thing.
Have any women reported being pregnant with an alien's baby?
Yes, this is actually called the missing fetus syndrome because people will suddenly experience a pregnancy when they know that they shouldn't, unless some of them do have memories of being with ETs and then suddenly they're pregnant. Some people just suddenly find themselves pregnant after having a very close-up UFO sighting or an abduction. So yes, that is, and then what typically happens about 3-4 months later is they'll have another experience, another abduction, and suddenly they're no longer pregnant.
Wow.
In some cases, this can go up to 6 or 7 months. I talked to a lady who had, the ultrasound. Everyone knew she was pregnant. She'd bought baby clothes, done the whole deal, and boom, they had a missing fetus. The fetus was gone. The doctors could not find it.
Now we heard from 3 abductees. We heard from a witness to an abduction case. We heard from an expert who's written 17 books on this topic over 25 years. Could it be really that 1 in 50 people are being abducted?
Yeah, I don't know what it is about this whole area here, but it's a huge hotbed. I've investigated a number of cases over here in Chatsworth, in Reseda. There was a case in North Hollywood involving a fireman. So I don't know exactly why it's such a UFO magnet, but yeah, it's a hotbed of activity of all kinds of cases, sightings, abductions, even there's some landing cases.
Now, after you were lying on the mat, what exactly do you remember?
I remembered like a red glow coming from outside. Like my blinds are closed. I can't see what's going through the blinds, obviously, but I could obviously see a red light of some kind. Like if you could imagine a car backing up, with its red lights, almost to the point where it's about to hit the window. That's what I saw.
Did you get up at all to investigate?
Actually, no, because I had this sort of sense, this kind of sense that whatever it was coming for me.
You couldn't do anything to prevent it.
I couldn't do anything to prevent it, and as it was approaching, I had this sort of tremendous amount of fear, and that came along with the fear is a type of sound, a swooshing sound. First it vibrated at lower frequencies, like 1, 2, 3, and then as it approached closer, it sort of vibrated a lot faster, like it rotated faster, like almost like a sewing machine. If you could hear a sewing machine, you could imagine what a sewing machine sounds like. Yeah. That's what it sounded like. And it got so loud that I realized the sound wasn't actually coming from outside. It was actually coming from within inside. I can feel it inside.
Could it be true? What these girls and Dave are saying is an amazing thing if it is. We are in for a big surprise if what they allege is true. Now, Dr. J. Allen Hynek coined the term close encounters of the fourth kind, which is basically ETs taking human beings. And as you heard from our expert and the witnesses themselves, there's been some crazy experiments going on. If true, what are they doing? What is this agenda? Well, let's hear some more and find out what they have to say.
And how many aliens do you think there were in the ship?
I believe there were 2. There were 2 that were coming for me.
And you believe each time you were abducted, it was the same 2 aliens?
Yes. I believe I don't know them by name, but I just kind of know them by presence, and I know one of them is sort of have a higher level. Like he's kind of like, you just kind of know by energy. Like when you're in the room with these beings, it's difficult to breathe, or the air is sort of heavy. And every time one of the beings would come closer, the air would feel more heavier. In a lot of my relationships, I have a problem with keeping a relationship because my friends would ask me, when did you lose your virginity? And I would be confused because I don't know if my first sexual encounter was with a human or was with them. These beings can appear the way, whatever you want them to appear. In this case, I had sex what looks like Snow White or Cinderella, although I knew it wasn't real. You know, I knew it was a way for them, it was a process for them to get what they need from me.
And Dave's case, I mean, it's obviously genuine. It hits all the markers. I think you're asking all the right questions. And in particular, he doesn't remember going on board. He remembers just suddenly appearing. That's very common. That's called doorway amnesia. And it turns out in most every abduction case, people don't remember being taken into the ship specifically. They remember being in their room or driving. Next thing they know, they're in a room on the ship. So,
Do you think the aliens can pick and choose certain parts of the memory that they want to suppress?
yeah, I think that's another very good question. I think you're exactly right about that. In some cases, they suppress people's memories, I think, to protect them from the trauma of the whole experience. And in other cases, I think they're just covering their tracks. They don't want to be seen. They don't want people to know about them, at least not at that point. So,
Is it a similar thing to have the aliens use a popular icon or image to hide their true, what they look like?
yeah, that's called a screen memory, and that is very common. I've heard a number of different variations of that. People remember seeing owls. That's very common, or stuffed teddy bears. I've heard that several times. So what David is describing is absolutely something I've heard before, and I think the ETs are doing it to make the abductee feel more comfortable with their presence and to lessen the whole fear level. And at the same time, you know, it protects their identity a little bit. So I don't think it's the abductee who's making this up. This is something the ETs are actually projecting onto the abductee.
Now you said you can't remember a large portion of the abductions. Do you really know why that might be?
I feel there may be a time and a place that I might remember or recollect my memories, but I really do feel it's like it's a memory that's waiting to come out. Like there's a specific, I have this feeling that there's a specific time I'm supposed to remember what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to do yet, but I feel there's something that in the future, that's something like people like me that need to do something.
That's not uncommon. When someone has this kind of experience, often it is shrouded in amnesia. Some people remember all of it, some people remember none of it. Most people remember 10, 20, 30%.
Did you ever get a glimpse of their true form?
Yes, they remind me of an ant.
Like a large ant though?
Like a large ant, like an ant that has a head of an ant, but it doesn't have the antennas, and it's in a sort of like a frail, skinny body, like an anorexic body.
Is that possibly why, because they're frail, did they fear that you could hurt them, which is why they reduced the oxygen when they were near you?
That's what I would do.
I see. Do you think you were under any anorexic or mind-numbing type thing?
Yes, I feel I was. I definitely felt like I was not in control.
And that could have been why you don't remember a good portion of it too.
And to some extent, I kind of think that I didn't remember. I'm not ready to remember those kind of things. It's not easy to remember those kind of emotional stress. And I could tell you right now, I could sort of remember some of them, like if it was happening right now.
Have you ever been through any hypnotherapy?
Yes, I have.
Did it get any results? Did you find anything?
Yes, I have. And it turned the negative aspects of it into a positive thing, because now I was able to remember some parts of it that now I know that whatever I was going through, it was going through something like a greater thing, you know. So I felt sort of privileged that I was part of that. But I feel a lot of people are a part of that. I believe every person is part of that.
We're all part of like a system.
We all part of a system. It's a process. And one day, whether it be the life or the next life, and you have all the eternity to find out, that you will find out who you really are. And that's the beauty of it. And that's what these beings were showing me, is they were showing me that, you know, we are already set, you know. And I think that's where evolution, that's where we're going to evolve into a higher level of existence, is because we know that.
Kind of like a caste system, you might say. You know, once we're reborn, we can be reborn into a different role in the system.
Right, in the system, it's just recycling, and one experience is learned from the other experience. And I'm telling you, it's sacred. You're every time here, every day you live, it's it's the now that counts.
Is this involved only for humans and living beings, or like possibly like flies or snails? Are they part of the system as well?
They're all connected. They're all connected to this thing I call the source, or the place of all that is. And the way I look at it, this source has all the information that's trying to understand itself. It's almost information that's trying to understand itself, and the way it does that is it lives its experience through you. It knows everything in an intellectual fashion, but it wants to know what it's like to be there. It wants to know what it's like to be human, to love like a human, to be sad like a human. And the beauty about that is you're doing that right now, so that when you go back to the source knows.
Do you know why the aliens chose to experiment on us?
That is the million-dollar question. They're obviously very interested in us for some reason. I think what the evidence is showing is that they are interested in taking our genetic material to help supplement their own race, which apparently they're having some troubles with reproduction. And this is why a lot of abductees are reporting seeing hybrid babies or babies on board these craft. Apparently the ETs are taking our genetic material and replenishing the race. So that's one of the reasons they're very interested in us.
How involved do you think the ETs are with our human government?
Oh, there's no doubt that our government is neck deep involved with ETs. Pretty much every aspect of our government, the NSA, the Army, the Air Force, all of them have files and files and files about UFOs. And a lot of them have been covered up. Only a small portion have been released through the Freedom of Information Act. Not only are they studying it, and they know about the whole situation, the evidence that is coming out is that they're working with the ETs. At the very least, we have their craft, we have their bodies. But I think in some cases, yeah, we're actually physically working with ETs to some extent.
Do you think it has a very negative consequences of working with the ETs, or are they generally friendly, nice people?
It's hard to say. I think in some cases there is a negative aspect to this. There's a story running around in the UFO community, which is pretty, it's been repeated a lot, that a lot of these abductions are in exchange for technology. I'm not sure if that's true, but apparently our government allowed abductions to take place so that the ETs would give technology. So that is kind of a negative aspect to it. On the other hand, there are positive aspects to this. The ETs are, the main message they're giving to the abductees is improving the environment or alternative healing, warning against pollutions, warning against natural disasters and things like this. So I think there is a positive aspect to the whole ET contact, though it's very scary for some people.
Your huge eyes reminded me of ants.
What about, did you see any of their body? Was it large or muscular, perhaps?
It was muscular skin, almost like a cut. Like they're kind of ripped, but they're fat. But they're not. I mean, there's no fat, but they're frail. It's like I feel like if I could kick them, I would really break them in pieces.
Do you know how far away the ETs come from?
We don't know. We know they've been here for thousands of years at least. They're here in much greater numbers since 1947. It could very well be that they are coming from within our own planet, having bases. They could have bases in outer space. I think there's some evidence for that on the moon and other planets within our solar system. But certain planets and star systems have been named, like in particular Zeta Reticula. That's been named Orion, Arcturus. There are certain star systems that people have been told this is where their ETs are coming from. But we don't really know. That could be interdimensional.
Now, you said you were very young when the first abductions happened. And you said the aliens took the appearance of toys?
Yes, they took appearance of toys in my room, or like Sesame Street Muppets. And it's, as I got older, as I got to like G.I. Joe, or, they started taking form of those. But I always knew it was them. It's for some reason I just knew it wasn't right, It's almost like they knew what I was thinking, or what I played with, or what I'd like to play with.
So do you think they were studying you during this whole time of your life?
I was more like worried, more like how did they even know, that I liked that. I mean, that's kind of like I kind of knew they could see what I was thinking in my mind.
Some abductees say that they were shown scenes of mass destruction of Earth. Can you expound on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. That is actually pretty common. It's one of the most common things that people are told when they're taken on board a UFO. Normally, they're very tight-lipped. They don't talk much at all to the abductee. They'll say, "Don't worry, don't be afraid, we won't hurt you." And that's about it. That's it for most abductees.
So I know it's probably hard to remember, but did they have any clothing on, or was it just their bare bodies?
I believe they had some clothing on, but it was so tight, it was almost like a skin, maybe, like a skin type clothing type. But I only get to see it for a brief moment, because now they kind of transform back into this image that I'm familiar with, which I mentioned earlier. Like they would look like cartoon characters that I was familiar with, or certain characters that, that would pretty much, I'll feel more comfortable if they look like somebody that I like maybe a friend or a Star Wars character,
Do you know how far away they came to see us? Were they from a different planetary system?
No, that I don't know. I don't know. But my feeling is it doesn't really, I don't think they really come from out there.
Now, can you briefly go over the different types of ships and the interior and exterior of them?
Yeah, the ships actually come in all different shapes and sizes, and what's really fascinating about these ships is they can actually change shape. Some people will see a little ball of light come down and it expands into a very large ship. And these ships can get really large. We're talking, size of battleships, football fields. This is how people describe them, as floating cities. Some ships are very small, like little probes, little balls of light that can come down and float in front of your car, things like this. That's also pretty common. So you get a huge variety of shapes. I'm going to say the most common shape of a UFO is the saucer-shaped, with little lights around it, your classic Hollywood flying saucer. Another very common shape is the triangular shape. But beyond that, you get all different kinds of shapes and sizes, some that are really odd shaped that you can't even really describe. There are, not only these small scout ships, there are very large motherships, which I think are floating outside our planet, and maybe even on the moon or other planets within our solar system. And this is where a lot of these ships, I think, are parked, because we're talking about a lot of people getting abducted and a lot of sightings on a daily basis. So this is going on a very large mass scale. So yeah, there's different types of ships, all different types. And
what are some different types of interiors that abductees have described to you?
Actually, the interiors of these ships are, I can almost always tell when someone's lying to me, because the descriptions are so similar. People often describe, well, pretty much always describe, rooms that are rounded corners. There are no square corners like we have in our homes. It's almost always rounded. People describe the lighting system also in a very strange way. They can't see the source of the light. It's as if the walls glow, or as if light is coming from some unknown source. That's very common. People also very commonly report trouble breathing or a very strange, stuffy atmosphere. And they'll report pastel colors on the walls, light blue, or even kind of a burnished aluminum color. That's also very common.
What are some of the physical symptoms of abduction?
There are actually a number of symptoms. People often describe eye pain from looking at these lights for too long. Often people will come away from an abduction with a scar where they were cut by the ETs, where they were examined for, that's the most common thing, is when someone's taken on board, they're laid out and examined. So they often will experience scars and things like this. Another very, well, not very common, but does turn up is healings. This turns up in about, up to 10% of the cases where people report a healing of some kind. And they range from everything from colds to cancer, you name it. And these healings are usually done through lights, which I find very interesting. ET's understanding of the electromagnetic spectrum is way beyond ours. So they're using lasers and all kinds of things in ways that we don't know how. They can literally open up the flesh and zip it closed with a light, just like on Star Trek. So that's been reported several times. And other people have reported seeing their entire interiors of their bodies illuminated kind of with this light, like an X-ray. So they have incredible healing abilities, and have healed, there's healing cases all across the United States and the world. I think there's about 1 to 200 on record right now.
Are there any known ET bases possibly on Earth?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that there are, in fact, ET bases on Earth, and a number of them. Right off the coast here in Southern California, there's a huge amount of underwater UFO activity. I've collected over 100 reports of people coming in, or people who see UFOs coming in and out of the water.
Wow.
So I think there's got to be at least a parking lot of UFOs down there, if not a base. And there are other areas that have been, pointed to as having underground bases. In upstate New York, there's a whole lot of activity. People have, again, seen UFOs coming in and out of the ground. Mount Shasta is another area. Costa Rica. So there's suspected UFO bases, I think, all across the world, and probably on the moon and other places like that.
What about the area we're at now, the San Fernando Valley? Have there been any reported cases here?
Oh yeah, this is a huge hotbed of activity. Topanga Canyon, actually, we're right along Topanga Canyon right now, and in 1992 to 1994 there was a huge wave of activity involving not only sightings and landings, but abductions and cars being chased down the road, and it's crazy. So yeah, there's a number of abduction cases. There's an abduction case that took place about a mile away from here in Chatsworth involving two ladies. One lady, she saw the craft actually come down in the alleyway behind her condominium. This
Wow.
is, a place you would never expect a UFO to land. And she saw, the typical gray type ET. So that's very commonly described. Another person in Reseda, about 3 miles that way, saw again these gray type ETs come into his bedroom, and their next door neighbor, pretty much next door, a couple houses down, also saw gray type ETs.
What are some important or memorable things that aliens have said to abductees?
Yeah, their messages are actually pretty consistent. Over and over again, they're warning us about overpopulation, particularly nuclear proliferation. They're very against nuclear power. In fact, have hovered over nuclear power stations and nuclear missiles and turned them off. So they're very much opposed to nuclear power, I think, because we're messing around with it.
So you mentioned that the aliens are infiltrating our society.
Right.
Are there any possible reasons why they're doing this?
It's hard to say. They're making alien babies. There's no doubt about that. Half alien, half human. And as time is going on, it seems that some of these hybrid people are walking among us and look very much like us. I've talked to people who have seen ETs that they said could walk among society. And I've got a number of cases all across the United States, and the world for that matter, where people have seen odd-looking humans which are partially ETs, and or seen them, in connection with a UFO.
Much like
So
the Nords.
Yeah, they're among us, no doubt about it. It's hard to say why. I'm not sure they're going to take over our planet like some researchers think.
Can you talk a little bit about the theories of Dr. Jacobs?
Dr. Jacobs believes that the ETs are basically going to use their hybridization program to have the hybrid babies, as they grow up, eventually come and live among us. I think to a certain extent there's some validity to that theory, because a lot of the abductees are reporting seeing hybrid babies. We are seeing these hybrids looking very much like us. I've talked to a number of people who have seen ETs that look very much like us and could pass as human. So I think there is some validity to that theory. I personally don't think that ETs are going to take over our planet. They could have done so long ago if they wanted to. But it's hard to say. I think that we are up for big changes.
What about the probes put in the abductees?
Yeah, alien implants. I think pretty much every abductee probably has at least one or more of these implants, and we're not sure what they're for, but the most common theory is they're used for tracking or possibly mind control. But I have talked to several abductees who've been told by the ETs that the purpose for these implants is manifold. There are multiple purposes, including not only tracking, but boosting their immune system and measuring the level of pollution in their body. So there are good reasons for these implants. And I do know people who have had these removed sometimes regret it because the ETs come back and put another one back in.
Wow.
So yeah, that happens in case after case.
Now, isn't it possible that they are just impregnated by humans instead?
In some cases, yes, but in other cases, absolutely not, because these people have not had sex. They know it, and so there's no way they could be pregnant. It's impossible. So, and yet they are. So how do you explain that, other than the fact, that it has something to do with that UFO encounter they had where they remember being taken on board and remember, this ET laying on top of them or extracting sperm or injecting something into their abdomen, and this type of thing. So yeah.
Ask it one more time, Jack.
Preston, say how can it be possible when a woman knows she hasn't had sex for 5 years, which several is hot or something like that. Because I remember you were hearing a case on TV where a woman was astounded. The one where they had a baby, she said she hadn't had sex in 5 years. How could she be pregnant?
Her boyfriend was outraged.
That's the question.
Or just in your answer, say some women up to 5 years.
Okay. Now, couldn't it be possible that these women were just impregnated by humans instead?
Well, of course it's possible. In a number of these cases, people have not had sex for 1, 2, 3, 5 years even. There are cases where people have not had sex for years and suddenly they're pregnant. So how do you explain that?
We want to thank everybody on the ground in Los Angeles, Dr. J. Andy Ilias, Preston Dennett, and young Jack Graham for interviewing and sharing their insight of what happened to David, Rachel, and Jacqueline in their regards to alien abduction. And if you've captured anything amazing in regards to UFOs, contact Third Phase of Moon via Skype or Facebook. My name's Blake Cousins, and we'll see you again next time.
Third Phase of Moon. Third Phase of Moon.